Well, it looks like our people joining have slowed down, so we'll go ahead and get started with supporting student well-being. I'd like to thank Christy and Chuck for being here today, and I will turn it over to them.
All right, thanks, Mackenzie. My name's Christy Hutton. I'm the director of the Wellness Resource Center and a licensed psychologist. I spent a lot of years at the MU Counseling Center before I made the transition, and I'm super excited today to be here with one of my counseling center friends.
Yeah, so I'm Chuck Burgess. I'm one of the licensed psychologists at the MU Counseling Center, and as you probably heard Christy and I talking about a second ago, I've taken over her old office here in Parker Hall.
Quite literally, he replaced me.
Not
Okay.
entirely.
Let's get started and kind of walk through. We're going to walk through a lot of the changes that have happened in student health and well-being. And Chuck, I just realized that one of the things I don't have because I don't have access to my notes is I don't know who's talking when.
Okay.
So you're going to have to give me some cues.
You're these first three. I'll jump in about online mental health screening.
So we've done a lot to kind of enhance services and try to think through how students can access care when they need care and what kind of care students are needing. And we've gotten a lot of feedback from students about that over the last year. So for those who don't know or aren't aware yet, the Counseling Center, the Health Center, and the Wellness Resource Center have been working on integrating into one unit called Student Health and Wellbeing. And you've potentially seen this graphic quite a lot around campus that just kind of highlights that we aren't in one building. We're all over campus. There's actually almost a full mile between the Counseling Center and the Health Center. And our folks in wellness, we have the benefit of being right in the middle. And so we'll talk through a little bit more about the different services and what we do in just a little bit. I think, one of the things that we are trying to do is create opportunities for students to get involved with well-being on campus. And so we've got some ways for students to do that, to build skills. And so a lot of our students tell us that maybe they didn't need counseling, or maybe it was at one of those really high volume times in the year when they decided they needed some help. And so it was a little bit harder to get into the counseling center. And so we've built out opportunities for students to build skills, maybe as adjunct to some counseling, or maybe kind of ahead of counseling to build up some skills and decrease some of their distress so that when they get to counseling, their brain's working a little bit better. And we'll share some more information there. And then also how students can access treatment when that really is the right service. So how do students get involved? There are a couple of different ways that students can be involved in helping us create a campus where students can thrive. And so one of the options is peer education. We have a peer education program where we actually provide a lot of training to students, and a lot of the training are things that are transferable into work life. So how to facilitate, conversation, how to do presentations, how to build communication, how to engage people through social media, and a whole lot of other kinds of training. And so that's a program that's available to any student at Mizzou. And then we also, through the Wellness Resource Center, offer a number of internships and practicum experiences. And so for both undergrad and graduate students, for grad students, it's a little bit more limited depending on the department, but for undergrads, we have interns that come from business, from marketing, from journalism, from social work, from psychology, health sciences, and pretty much any area of campus. I think this summer we've got somebody from the nutrition and exercise physiology program. And so we have a lot of different opportunities, and our goal is to really provide an opportunity that helps students with their academic and professional development, but also that builds a portfolio or builds something that they can then take out as real experience when they're looking for a job after graduation.
Yeah, and I'll jump in here and talk about just a couple of self-guided resources that are available to, they're really available to everybody. So these might be good resources for you to offer to students who you might be, interacting with in some capacity. So this first one are our online mental health screening resources. And there's a web address right there, which, obviously you can't click on right now. Probably the easiest way to get to this is actually to go to the well-being webpage and then go to the Counseling Center webpage within that. And then the second quick link in the right-hand column of the Counseling Center webpage actually directs to the front page for these online screeners. And so this is a really...
Chuck, I'm going to interrupt you for just a second to tell people that that should be a direct link from our home page very soon.
Okay.
So you won't have to go through all of those clicks to get there.
Gotcha. But yeah, you can, some kind of combination of Mizzou mental health online screening will get you there. And this is a really good resource for a student who, let's say that they're, maybe struggling a little bit, or, maybe starting to wonder if like, hey, something's going on, like, is this rising to the level that I should be like, talking to somebody about this, or like seeking services related to this. And I don't know the backgrounds of folks who are here, but that can be a really tough question to answer. And so this is just a nice resource that you could direct students to start to answer that question for themselves. So what's available through this resource are a bunch of standardized screeners. There is one just kind of global general mental health screener. And then there are other screeners that are more specific to a variety of topics, whether that's alcohol use, broad substance use, depression, anxiety, PTSD, things like that. And so all of those resources are self-directed. Students, choose which one they think is appropriate. There's a series of questions. And then after they answer that series of questions, they'll get a very brief report, essentially saying like, hey, you might want to talk to somebody about this. Or it'll say like, what you've described isn't really, kind of rising to the level of what we might consider, this particular presentation, but, here are some resources anyways. You can still, talk to these people. And so it's a good way to get just sort of a, almost like a first opinion, about what's going on. And, it also saves you from having to feel like you have to make that determination yourself, because you really don't. The second self-guided resource that I'll direct you to is Sanvelo. So Sanvelo is an app that is very slick. It's available on iOS and Android. And this is something that is available to everybody. If you have a missouri.edu or a umsystem.edu address, you have full access to the paid version of Sanvelo because we have a contract with them. And so a lot of times when I'm talking to students about Sanvelo, I'll describe it as sort of a portable self-care toolkit. Sanvelo offers a lot of different types of resources that are all based on strong empirical evidence that essentially support student self-care and self-reflection and starting to build insight. It works great as like a standalone self-care toolkit for folks who maybe just need a little bit of a booster. It also works really well in supplement to therapy. A lot of times when I'm working with students, if it's appropriate for the person and if they seem like the kind of student who is, inclined to doing something like this, I'll encourage them to get started and get in the habit of making it just sort of a routine part of their day-to-day activities. And then we'll talk about it. One of the great things that Sanvelo does is it gives you this periodic check-in throughout the day, just asks like, hey, how's it going? If it catches you during, kind of a rough time, it'll have a suggestion for like, hey, here's how you can maybe give yourself a break or relax or calm down for a second so that you can get back to what you were doing. If it happens to catch you in the good mood, it's obviously not going to try and interfere with that, but it'll say like, hey, here's some ways that you can maybe savor this moment, like get outside, go for a walk, like really enjoy the fact that like you're in a good place right now. And it also has some journaling and sort of light cognitive behavior therapy based self-interventions. There's really great resources there for identifying and learning how to challenge unhelpful thoughts. There's also really great resources in there for coping specifically with stress and anxiety, even rising to the level of panic attack. So this is a great resource for students. And like I said, it's available to you as faculty and staff as well. So absolutely use this. The more people use this, the better it looks for us, because the better a deal that contract is looking like. So please download Sanvelo and tell everybody about it. And I forgot to mention this beforehand, but if anybody has any questions, I'm keeping an eye on the chat window, or if you feel comfortable with it, you can unmute yourself. Very much want to make this useful for you. And we'll definitely leave some time at the end for questions, comments, discussions, things like that. And Christy, I'll pass it back to you to talk about the next few.
Okay. Sorry, my office phone is forwarded into my office today and I can't make it stop. So one of the other things that we did over the past year in response to student requests is we developed some additional online, on-demand online resources for students. And so within the Canvas platform, we created a course, and it's not the kind of course that you enroll in and you start at the first module and work your way all the way through to the end. It's really more like a Mizzou-specific self-help resource. And so you can go into it and say, oh, hey, I want to learn about alcohol today, or I'm really anxious and I want some skills for what to do about that. And you click on that icon and you can do that module. And then, maybe that's the only thing you need from us, or maybe a little while later you come back and you say, oh, well, habits for a healthy mind, that'd be cool. I'd like to learn about that. And then in addition to this, when we talk about workshops in a minute, you'll notice some similar titles. And so we have a number of our programs where we have this on-demand version, we have a live version, and then we're doing snippets and short videos that we're sharing out on social. And so really trying to provide the information to students in whatever way that student wants to engage with it. So for the course in Canvas, there's a lot of different topics and we're still building it out. So I think every semester you'll see this course evolve a little bit more as we get more feedback, as students tell us more about things that they're needing from us in this platform. So any student can enroll. There's no cost for enrolling. It's not tied to a semester, and there's no academic credit associated with the course. And so we'll be getting a lot more information. Now, we did a soft rollout this spring semester, and we're starting to see engagement with it picking up a lot as we hit the latter part of the semester, and even into summer. I'm getting those notifications telling me that students are enrolling, which is super fun to see.
Yeah. We did have one question related to this. Somebody asked where these are housed in Canvas.
So we have a course that's called Student Health and Wellbeing, and we can also get the links to all of the things that we're talking about today to Susan, so those can go out to folks. When I'm able to be in my office and have multiple screens, I can do fancy things like drop it into chat, but that didn't work the way I planned today.
I was attempting that, but I'm apparently logged out, and so I don't want to get my phone out to do that. So we'll make sure to get those links to Susan so she can pass them along.
Yeah, and so there's an invitation code that's the easiest way for a student to find the course, and we'll have a lot of things out this fall and through summer welcome and fall welcome that actually will give a QR code for students to be able to get there quickly. And we'll be sending out things to advising staff and other folks that have those direct links that you can send out easily to students. So yeah. Okay, I'm gonna go on. So one of the things that we hear a lot from not only our students, but our faculty and staff, and so where we have an opportunity to provide something for students that's also meaningful for us as staff, we take advantage of those opportunities. And so this is another one of those resources that's available to everyone here and to any student on our campus. Through our Partners in Prevention, that's our statewide prevention coalition focused on mental health and substance use and sexual assault. We have these two programs, and they're actually really fantastic programs. I just retook both of them a couple of weeks ago to refresh my memory, and every time I take them, I'm like, oh yeah, these are really good. So Ask, Listen, Refer is a suicide prevention training. It's about a 15 to 20 minute training, depending on how you move through it. And it teaches you how to recognize signs that somebody may be thinking about suicide, and then what to do if you find yourself there. And it also has information about now would be a great time to call the counseling center, and how you might engage with police, although that's different from one campus to another. We have a pretty great police force, and so being thoughtful about the student that you're working with and how they may experience police involvement, just know that our police department's great. So when you're going through that stuff, it'll provide that level of resource information as well. And then the Macro Collegiate Recovery Ally training is really for students and our campus community to learn how to support students who are coming to Mizzou while also trying to live in recovery from a substance use disorder. And so some of you may be like, yeah, we really need that. And others may think there aren't any students here in recovery. What we know is that there are somewhere between 600 and 1,000 students in any given year who are trying to live in recovery. And they tell us that Mizzou makes it very difficult. And so if we can get students really thinking about, and just our whole community, some training and education around how to support those students, I think we'll do a better job of keeping those students and helping them flourish and thrive here at Mizzou. And so another one of the resources that we've had for a long time, but we're doing something very different with it this fall. You may have heard of our BASICS program, and that's typically been associated with a student who gets in trouble for a substance use violation on campus, and so they're referred to BASICS as part of their sanction through the Office of Accountability and Support. That's still true, we do that. But this year we're really expanding our brief intervention program, and we'll have resources available for any student who is wondering if their substance use might be impacting their academic success or their social situations, or maybe they're getting feedback from friends or family members that this is a concern, but they're not sure if that's true, but maybe they're open to thinking about it. One of the things that we believe will be true in the fall is that we're going to see a lot more students with problematic substance use. And, I think if you think about your friend group, you may be able to think about, experiences where people have either relied on or joked about relying on alcohol or other drugs to get through COVID. I kind of, in my head, have a little alliteration coping through COVID with cannabis, because I hear students all the time, when we talk about the challenges and the stresses of all of the disruption to their lives in the past 14 or 15 months. A lot of them are saying, they're smoking a lot or they're using cannabis a lot more than they used to. And so while we're in this sort of weird universe, I think you can do more of that and it doesn't show up as much. But when we come back to a more typical way of engaging with one another, I think we'll start to see more students who begin to either recognize that the substance use patterns that they developed during COVID aren't really very helpful to them now that we're back in person, or they'll start to see some of the fallout. So, changes to academics, changes to social life, changes to mental health or health. And so we really wanted to beef those programs up so that students it's kind of a first stop in a lot of ways. We're not providing treatment for substance use disorders, but we're a great place to come and just figure out if this is something that you do want to change. And if it is, we can oftentimes give students some possibilities for how they can engage in that and then support them as they work toward those goals. If a student really needs a more specialized treatment, then we can also facilitate getting them into that service or connecting them with counseling or the health center or other resources that they may be needing. And then in our brief intervention area, we have nicotine cessation services. And this is one of those other things that's available to anybody in our campus community, including you. And so for anybody who's wanting to reduce their nicotine use, and it doesn't matter what delivery system, smoking, pipes, Zen, whatever it is, vape, we can work with you to either decrease or eliminate that use from your day-to-day life.
And I'll jump in for these next couple. So Christy alluded to this a second ago when she was talking about the self-paced online modules. We also offer a lot of live workshops and events, and these are offered in collaboration between our centers. That's the Student Health Center, the Wellness Resource Center, and the Counseling Center. And there's a huge variety of workshops that we offer. They've all been offered online for this past year, and came prepared with a link to this because these are all accessible through Campus Labs. Like I said, these are offered by various professionals working in our different centers. A number of them are put on by health educators in the Wellness Resource Center. Other staff members from the Counseling Center will put on workshops over the course of the semester. I know one of the really exciting ones from this past semester was one about healthy communication and relationships, and that was actually hosted by one of our new staff members who specializes in that area. And so if you're interested in learning more, you can certainly peruse the offerings on this webpage. If students are interested in attending, they can register for these workshops through Engage. You can also just contact the Wellness Resource Center, and Christy or somebody else there will be able to direct you. This is maybe getting outside of the purview of this presentation, but sometimes campus organizations will request presentations or workshops. I know one that I've done, on a semi-annual basis has been a workshop about managing stress specifically for graduate and professional students. And I really enjoy doing those things. It's a chance to get more in touch with the campus community. So if we hop on to the next slide. This is the care team. So one of the services that we offer at the counseling center are crisis and consultation services. Anybody on campus or any family member of a student can call our office and, essentially ask us or talk to us about something that's happening. And one of the things that they'll sometimes ask is like, hey, can you reach out to the student that I'm concerned about? And unfortunately, in my role at the counseling center, I always have to say, no, I'm sorry, that's not something that we do. However, that's not to say that there's not a resource on campus that can do that. And so that would actually be the care team, and also the dean of students office. Those are the folks that I direct, parents and faculty and staff to. So the care team is not a clinical resource, but they are designed to provide support, coaching, and referrals for students who might be in need. They do also have more capacity than we do, to be able to reach out to students, and they'll do so through a variety of different methods. So, if a student is living in on-campus housing, they might try and make contact with the student via the RA or the hall coordinator. Or if there's a academic advisor that is, very close to the student and trusted by the student, they might work with that person to figure out a way to make contact with the student that isn't going to seem like I'm being called into the principal's office to kind of put it that way. And they're equipped to help guide students and assist students with a variety of different concerns, whether those are academic concerns, like, let's say their attendance all of a sudden drops off, or they're missing assignments, or a professor's having a hard time getting in contact with students. It can help with financial stressors, so food insecurity, homelessness, other financial struggles. Obviously, medical and mental health. The way these might show up in your interactions with students are, a sudden change in appearance or behavior that a student might be presenting, or perhaps the student telling you about things that they're, struggling with that you might be concerned about. Also issues related to sudden or unexpected loss of, family or friends, that can cause huge disruptions in students' lives. They can also help with interpersonal conflict and do some mediation. So in incidences of extreme harassment or bullying, things like that. They can also just do the task of getting students connected with other resources. That's always one of our, perennial struggles is, we try and offer these things, but, we can only do so much if people don't know we exist or that these services are being offered. And so one of my favorite quotes from one of my favorite movies is the art of good business is being a good middleman. And, that is partly the role of the care team, is to be that bridge that connects students to these resources that are really designed to support them. And I'll pass it back to you, Christy, for this next one.
So just to kind of walk through what we do and how to direct students between our offices. So the Counseling Center is our campus mental health resource. And so providing some of those services that we talked about earlier through the Wellness Resource Center, while they come out of our office, as Chuck mentioned, they're actually services sometimes of the Counseling Center staff. We offer group therapy, and I always talk about group therapy, one, because I love group therapy, but two, because I think it gets a bad rap. And so I think a lot of times if a student hears that they're being referred to a group, their reaction, and sometimes the reaction of the staff or faculty who've referred them to us, is kind of this sense that it's a secondary or lesser option. And so I really want to dispel that myth, because what our research tells us, and actually what our students tell us, is that when we can get them into a group, they actually do extremely well. And they like the groups, they learn a lot in the groups, and they actually see change happen. And the research would tell us that that's really consistent, that we would expect for this age group that group therapy is sort of the cherry on top treatment for a lot of the things that our students are presenting with. Not everybody, we don't refer every student to group, but when that referral is made, it's because we really do think that it's going to be the most helpful resource for students. And we have a lot of groups available every semester that sort of varies just a little bit based on demand and some of those kinds of things, but we typically have groups that can help students navigate things like anxiety and depression. We have things that focus on relationship skills. We have a people of color support group, a grad student support group, I think an international support group now. And so we're really trying to build that group program up because it's the best. We also do individual therapy, and that will be our first referral when that's the right first referral. And then, as Chuck mentioned before, we have 24-hour crisis and consultation services. And students can access that by calling our regular phone number. In addition to that, faculty and staff can reach out to us and get consultation for how to navigate a particular situation with a student, how you might provide support to a student when it's time to get more clinically professional staff involved. And so that's something that we make available to everybody, and really enjoy having those interactions with our colleagues across campus. The health center looks a lot the same as it has across time. There are some changes there, but we have a really stellar staff of primary care providers who are also a good first step for mental health. They do a stellar job of working with things like anxiety and depression and helping get students in the door for mental health care. We have psychiatry available as well. So if a student's concerns are more complex or they're not responding to typical ways of treatment, we can access psychiatry through student health as well. We have an immunization clinic. You've probably been more aware of student health this year during the COVID pandemic, as they're our testing site. And while we're not doing vaccines at this point, I think, pay attention in the fall. That could change. I think right now we're relying on MU Healthcare, and they're doing a great job. And so I don't know that that will change, but if it does, we'll make sure that we get that information out to everybody. The health center has a few days a week, folks from the counseling center are in residence at Student Health to provide that behavioral health consultation approach that Student Health has sort of cultivated over the last 10 years or so. So we're really able to do this nice, warm, seamless process for students when they're experiencing mental health concerns. If their most comfortable front door is the health center, or if they present to the health center with health issues, but as the physician is working with them, they realize that this is actually related to stress or related to anxiety, which is often the case when people are presenting with headaches and stomach aches and things like that. And so we can have a really nice relationship that way. And then if students have questions about health conditions or about medication, they can 24 hours a day call the health center and talk with a nurse through MU Healthcare. And then through the Wellness Resource Center, those of you who've been around a while may associate the Wellness Resource Center with Kim Dude and a long history of stellar alcohol prevention work. And we have not forgotten our roots. We're still doing those kinds of things, but our scope of practice has really expanded quite a lot. And so we're essentially, our domain is well-being. And so if you know anything about well-being, you know that that's a very large canvas that we have to play on. And so we're really excited to be creating all of these different ways that we can engage students in what we're doing. We're connecting with the Honors College in new ways this year. And we have about 10 graduate students who are joining our staff for next year to help us with workshops and our brief intervention programs, and to help us with our communication and all kinds of things. So we're super excited after this year with almost no students to have a really stellar staff of graduate students from the School of Social Work, from Education School and Counseling Psychology, and some undergrads from a variety of places around campus. So we're excited about that. And we've talked through most of what our office does. All those things we talked through at the beginning, that's sort of the work of the Wellness Resource Center in collaboration with the rest of our unit. I think it's really important for you to know always that if you are engaging with students to support mental health and well-being, that you're never alone in that work. So whether you're, in whatever capacity you're with a student, we're always a phone call away. And so as Chuck mentioned, and as I mentioned a second ago, you can call our office 24 hours a day to consult about a student. I will say if you call us between 8 and 5, you get one of our local folks. After hours, we contract with a company who what they do is provide after hours care for universities. And it's been a fantastic service. We've had it for about probably 6 years now, and we love it, and we get positive feedback from students about it as well. But you can access us 24 hours a day if there's a student sitting with you and you sort of reach your limit, whether that's your knowledge limit, your comfort limit, your emotional weight-bearing limit, your patience, whatever it is that's going on with that student in your efforts to try to move them toward help, and things just aren't moving that direction. You can call us and consult. You can say to the student, hey, the counseling center is really great about consulting. Why don't we just call and see if they've got suggestions for us? And then a lot of times, if we can actually engage that student on the phone, we can help them get connected to a resource that they're needing. The at-risk committee is out of the Dean of Students office. It works in conjunction with the care team. And so if you go to the Student Affairs website, click that Concerned About a Student button and file a report about a student, file a referral is probably a better way to say that. That report gets filtered into both the care team and the at-risk committee, and they decide if one or both of those organizations need to pick that up and carry it. And so we're able to really oftentimes reach out to students. The at-risk committee would be gathering information from around campus and using some natural supports oftentimes to connect with the students, or they may tag in the care team, whereas the care team is doing more of that direct service. And then we mentioned earlier the police department, and our MU Police Department is really committed to supporting student well-being and mental health. And the vast majority of their officers, it's almost 100% right now, of their officers have been specifically trained for crisis intervention, and they do a fantastic job. And so if you are super concerned about risk for harm to self or others, they're a great resource to tag in. Or if you have a student who sent an email basically saying goodbye to you on a Saturday, or even in the middle of a workday, you can contact MUPD to help make sure that that student is safe. Now, I say that with the caveat that if you're working with international students or students of color, be really thoughtful about that. You know, as much as you can, think through the experiences that you're aware of that student, and understand that not all students see a police officer in the same way. So while I think our police department is really stellar, I also recognize that just them entering a building can sometimes change a situation for a student.
All right. And so this is, you know, a little bit of the transition point in the presentation. You know, we had hoped to make this a little bit more of a kind of like open discussion or conversation. You know, but the stuff we're talking about right now is hard. You know, it can be difficult to talk about things like stress and anxiety in a way that is, you know, not pathologizing, but then also not going so far in the opposite direction that we accidentally end up trivializing or minimizing people's concerns. And that can be a tricky balance to strike. You know, our approach, or my thoughts around, you know, really any of the services or interventions that we offer is that, you know, everybody can benefit from learning skills for navigating life challenges. You know, I think anybody could benefit from a space that is, you know, entirely devoted to, you know, just thinking through and processing their experiences and emotions. You know, when students present to us, you know, or when they've presented to people, you know, faculty and staff in other roles on campus, you know, it can be hard to tell, you know, what is this person in front of me right now really needing? You know, sometimes just being a steady, comforting, listening presence for somebody is enough. You know, maybe that's what they need. But, you know, also sometimes students need a little bit more direct support. You know, we need to be a little bit more, you know, kind of directive and suggesting that, hey, like, you know, maybe you would benefit from getting connected to some of these services. You know, so what is that conversation going to look like? You know, how do those conversations go? You know, how does it look different when, you know, a student is coming to you asking for support? And what would it look like if maybe they weren't there yet, but you were wanting to suggest or recommend a student getting some kind of support? You know, and so there's not a right answer to that. That's actually one of the great things about the Ask, Listen, Refer training that Christy talked about earlier, is that, you know, it actually walks you through simulations of those conversations, you know, and there's kind of like branching conversation pathways, so you can kind of choose a few different options and get some feedback on, you know, kind of what the impact of taking the conversation down that path might actually be. But, you know, since we have you here and we're live, you know, I'm actually really curious to hear from you all. You know, how have these conversations gone in the past, or you know, how would you like these conversations to go in the future? You know, what are the situations that you know, could see yourself getting into in your various roles around campus, and, you know, what can we do to support you or talk you through some of that right now? So, you know, if folks want to like unmute themselves and jump in, you know, we can we can go off the cuff a little bit, you know, and maybe just answer some of the questions you might be asking yourselves right now.
Chuck, I recognize a lot of the names on this call today, and I know there are people in this call who do really great work with students. And so even if you don't have a question, but you have a great way that you found really successful, feel free to drop that in here too, because that may be useful to somebody else.
Absolutely, yeah. Success stories can be great templates for those of us who might be feeling a little bit less confident having these conversations with people. So yeah, I would love to hear situations that you feel like have gone well. There's a question in chat. Has anyone had luck using Canvas to communicate mental health tips to students? So I can speak for myself personally. I have used the Canvas page as a resource for students that I've done some consultation with. We don't have the capacity to check the back end. Christy talked before about she can see students who register for those things. I don't see that, so I don't know if they followed through on that recommendation. But it is a lot of really good information that's there. So I hope students are actually utilizing it. I know one of the barriers for, some staff members has been they just weren't aware of what was available on that page. And so they weren't recommending it to students. It just wasn't kind of on the forefront of their thought to suggest. So, familiarizing yourself with what's available on that page might be a good way to, kind of better utilize it or suggest it to students. But if anyone else has had experience with that, definitely feel free to jump in. We have another question from chat. I'm quite new to campus, so I'm still familiarizing myself with resources for students. What do we do if a student approaches us with concerns on affording services, specifically costs associated with individual therapy? So one of the great things about university and college counseling center settings is that oftentimes the services are covered by tuition and student fees, and that is the case here at MU. So there is no cost associated with counseling center services. The only time a student would get charged by us would be if they, no-showed for an initial evaluation, and then there's like a $10 rescheduling fee. Doesn't happen very often, but there's no charge for individual therapy services here at the counseling center. That being said, our scope of care is essentially providing brief individual and group therapy services. So, people hear brief therapy, and their first question is, okay, how many sessions do I get? And we really try and steer people away from, thinking about brief therapy in that way. For me, the defining characteristics of brief therapy are, being fairly goal-directed, whether that goal is, establishing coping skills or dealing with, an acute stressor, such as the adjustment to college or kind of preparing to graduate, or, an acute stressful or traumatic event that has happened. Or sometimes brief therapy looks like, kind of starting the work. Kind of maybe somebody who hasn't had experience with counseling before, this is kind of their first entry to it. And so if somebody were more inclined towards or were really needing long-term therapy, we're unfortunately not able to provide that here at the counseling center. But what we can do is help students get connected to therapists in the community. Unfortunately, here in Columbia, we are lucky enough to have a variety of services that either accept insurance or offer sliding scale fee or reduced cost services for students. And so we'll help students get connected with that, but that is one of the downsides of getting services other than the counseling center. So does that answer your question, Emily?
We also, in some specific circumstances, are able to finagle a pro bono community therapist. We're not able to do it often, but there are times when we can make a compelling enough case for a student to be able to make that happen.
Somebody just asked about access to the Canvas page. I think you have to be registered for the health and well-being class. No, that's not the case.
We can get a link. As soon as I'm not sharing my screen, I can grab that and drop it into chat so that that's easy to access. There's a specific code that we can use, but you can also just search student health in Canvas and it should come up, but I'm told sometimes that it is finicky about that. So, so I'll get that dropped into chat. Okay. Are we ready to?
Yeah, we can maybe drop the presentation.
Okay.
Yeah, great question. I really appreciate the questions coming in. So if anyone has anything else they want to ask about or hear about or know about, absolutely. We got a little while longer. We've got till 2:30, right?
We do, and I'm going to drop several links into the chat box here now that I can.
Gotcha. We have somebody asking about group therapy. So it varies from group to group. So for most of the like clinical or like therapy groups, the cap on the group size is usually like 10 to 12 students. Oftentimes what might happen, especially for the groups that, you know, start and then don't accept new members over the course of the semester. So these are things like the interpersonal process groups, the social confidence group. You know, those groups tend to end up with, you know, 8 to 10 students, you know, because some folks, you know, the group starts and they find out it's not the right fit for them and they, you know, drop out or, you know, change services. You know, for some of the workshops that are more focused on psychoeducation and skill building, I heard that we had one that had about 30 people in it because a class referred folks, the students, to this particular workshop for dealing with anxiety.
We had 60 people in some of our workshops.
Okay. Yeah. So it varies. You know, the difference between the workshops and the therapy groups, you know, like I said, the therapy groups are designed to be a little bit more focused, a little bit more intensive. They're meeting on a weekly basis, you know, throughout the semester, you know, whereas the workshops tend to be a little bit, you know, these kind of one-off events. You know, there's less of a pull for students to share, you know, personal information. The focus is more on learning particular skills or, you know, kind of communicating certain pieces of information there. So the workshops definitely can get a little bit bigger than the therapy groups.
We are working on some workshop series, things for like anxiety, sleep, some of those things that won't be just a one session, but it's still going to follow that same psychoeducational format. That there may be some experiential things, but there probably won't be a lot of individual sharing of stories, but more skills acquisition.
Yeah. And one other thing about, you know, kind of the referral process for therapy groups, if a student, the first step for any student who's interested in counseling services is to have an initial evaluation, which is just kind of our, you know, kind of first point of contact with students. It's a chance for us to meet the students, you know, gather information about, you know, kind of what's bringing them in, what the presenting concern is, you know, gather a little bit of history or contextual information to help us, you know, make a recommendation that's going to be helpful for the student. If they're referred to one of the groups, especially for the therapy groups, there will be a pre-group meeting where basically the student has a chance to meet with the co-facilitators of the group, you know, with just the student and them before the other group members are present, you know, and that's an opportunity for them to help the student establish goals for the group, you know, and also help to establish, you know, kind of goodness of fit for the group, you know, making sure that kind of where the student's at, they're in a position to be able to kind of get the most out of the group. And that, like I said, that's specific for the therapy groups. So somebody asking, so a couple of questions. Somebody asking if the workshop series will be free for students to enroll in. I believe all of our workshops are free.
The only thing that we do that comes with a cost to it is when we have students who are who receive sanctions through Office of Accountability and Support for substance use violations. There are costs associated with those programs, but everything else we offer at no charge.
Yeah. And then another person asking about resources for students struggling with eating disorders. So I can speak to this a bit, but then maybe I'll pass it off to Christy to talk about the rest of system. So within the counseling center, we do have therapists that specialize in that's a specific area of interest for them. That being said, we aren't able to provide the level of care that somebody might need if they were needing like medical oversight or something like that. So it sort of depends on where the person's at, what they're presenting with. But that's, it's a kind of common concern or issue that comes up that we see a lot of, kind of the subclinical eating disorder presentations. Okay, so somebody looking for support most other than like an intervention. So yeah, that's, in the context of individual therapy, that's, what it often looks like here. What about other student health and well-being resources? Christy, I know that they work with those students also in the student health center, but that might be a little bit more on the like intervention-y side.
There's not a whole lot. We tend not to do workshops for ED related things because there's a lot of risk associated with that for students. And so we try to keep that more in the clinical realm. We may have some things related to body image and body positivity and things like that, but that's not necessarily an appropriate fit for somebody with an eating disorder concern. I would say that one of the best ways for a student to get support there is through the counseling center. We do have an online program called Body U, and a student can participate in that program. There's no cost associated. There's an online screening. And then all of the interventions are done online, and it's the research shows that it works pretty well for students with binge eating disorder and bulimia, but they don't work with students who have anorexia. So folks who are subclinical, who don't have a diagnosable eating disorder, but are definitely having concerns there, that could be a great fit. And then for folks with maybe mild to moderate symptoms related to other things. So if somebody's not willing to go to the counseling center, that may be a nice first stop. And then that program will also refer folks back to the counseling center when that's the best resource for them. The health center is also an option. And oftentimes when we are working with somebody with eating disorders, we're making referrals to the health center, and we're working collaboratively with their team to make sure that students are, from a physical health perspective, staying in a safe place.
Do you have a link for the Body U program?
I will soon. It went down during COVID, and they're in the process of coming back up. Okay, I think I have most of the links in there now for the programs. If there was something we talked about and you're not seeing that link, one thing I will tell you, that one of the ways that you can be really involved in this conversation about mental health, but in a nice subtle way, is to add some of these links to your signature line. So if you get an email from me, at the bottom, it'll have my name and my title and all of my location and contact information. And then right under that, it has a sentence with a link to Sanbello and a sentence with a link to Ask, Listen, Refer and the macro training. And I think there's 4 or 5 links that I have in there, so that everybody who gets an email from me has an opportunity to know that those services and resources are available for students.
One other question about.
Yes, please send that link out to students. Always, often include it if you happen to teach a course. Include that in your Canvas course, the link out to that. We actually encourage, when it's appropriate in the work that you're doing, feel free to refer students into particular programs or just refer them more globally. And if you are teaching a class for credit, feel free to use these as extra credit opportunities that students can have. Ask, Listen, Refer, and Macro, they get a certificate, they can turn it in. Canvas and the workshops, a paragraph paper talking about what they learned and how they can apply it to help them achieve their goals, meet their values, improve their academic success, whatever it is that may be relevant to the class that you're teaching. So, connect with us in whatever ways are possible. And always, everything we do is from the Wellness Resource Center can be direct shared with students. We will have probably by the end of June, we'll have our fall workshop series in Engage for folks to take a look at. Okay, other questions or burning things you'd like to know about relative to student health and well-being? Usually when we do this, we get 1,012 questions, so we've learned to build a lot of time in. I think we could have talked a little longer today. You all know a lot already, I can see.
And sometimes questions come up afterwards, so you can always feel free to, well, I'll volunteer myself. You can email me with any questions you have. I'm sure Christy would also be willing to, field some emails.
Most days. And also, if you contact just the Wellness Resource Center directly, we can get you information, about anything, not so much the clinical services. We're going to put you in contact with the counseling or the health center relative to specific clinical questions. But, if you just have questions about how things work or how to direct students or some of those kinds of things, you can give us a call, and anybody on our staff should be able to help you with that. We have great students at our front desk, and they do a stellar job of being able to talk through our programs. We'll probably put Body U in MU Connect. No, that's not it. In MU Info once that program's up and running again, so probably early in the fall. And we do send an email out to students in the fall inviting them to participate in Body U. That doesn't mean it catches somebody when they need to see it, but just as information about how we put that out. And then I think we will probably build it into our Canvas course as well, and maybe add some connections to it and Engage to make it easier for students to find across the year. Okay, any other questions or comments, or are folks dying to have 8 minutes, 7 minutes of their day back?
I know I could always use an extra 7 minutes.
That's a gift of well-being right there. All right, well, it looks like we're not seeing other questions, but again, feel free to reach out to us outside of this context. We're always happy to share information or ask questions. Thanks for deciding to spend a little time with us to learn more about how we can support students and the things that are evolving and happening. I think you will see us being able to serve students maybe a little bit differently this year as we build out some additional services. So we're really excited about the things that we're able to do.
Yeah, and absolutely. Like I mentioned before, we can offer all the services we want, but if people don't know about them, if the word doesn't get out there, they're not that useful. So, all of you, thank you so much for, telling students about us and, putting the word out there. So thank you.
Thanks. Have a great rest of your Thursday.
Yeah. See ya.